I just want to start by saying I love camera gear. I like reading about stuff and trying things and obsessing about beautiful old lenses. And since I became a photographer, lots of people also ask me which camera they should buy or which lens I used for what. And if you go on YouTube and look at photography videos, I feel like a huge percentage of them are about this, about equipment. Is this lens sharper than that lens? Is full frame better than crop sensor? Is this autofocus better than that autofocus? Is this new camera bag better than that one? What's the must-have equipment for a travel trip? What's in my camera bag 2025 edition? And I get it. I understand why. The economics of the influencer economy only really work if people are making videos about things that you can click on and then you can buy them. And I'm really glad in a way that that economy supports a bunch of really creative, interesting people to work in this industry. But I wanted to make this video because I think it's so easy to see all that and to think that it's important to get sucked into the idea that to be a great photographer, you need the latest whatever, and then to feel bad or envious or sad or like less of a photographer because someone else out there has better gear than you do. Like you can't be a professional because you're not shooting full frame or you don't have the latest unbelievably sharp lens. And there are a lot of people in that boat, a lot of creative, talented people out there for whom spending thousands or even hundreds of dollars on camera equipment just is not realistic. And I know that because I was one of them. I grew up in a household where the idea that we could afford even a budget camera was out of the question. The first camera I used was a Pentax K1000 that I was lucky enough to be able to borrow from my public high school. And I never could have imagined owning one, let alone something better and fancier. And that is the truth for a lot of people. And it's also the case for many of the little human rights and nature conservation organizations that I work with around the world with little budgets that should be spent or need to be spent on much more urgent things than gear. And the truth is that camera equipment matters a little bit, but it doesn't matter nearly as much as what I want to talk about today, because not only does gear not matter that much, I think that thinking about equipment and spending money on it and spending the time to earn the money to spend on it actually takes us away from the things that are far more important. That in a sense, photography equipment can make us worse at photography. By spending time and spending money on equipment, we're spending less of it thinking about and being in and trying to understand the world around us. Equipment, in a way, can be the enemy of curiosity. But let me break it down a little bit. What do I mean practically? And I think there are two things. The first one is to be curious and to learn. And in my own career, I think what's enabled me to do well as a photographer is this above all. I don't think I'm anywhere close to being the best photographer out there, and I definitely don't have the fanciest gear. But I think I can do good work because in the fields that I work in, I know something about them, and I also know how much I don't know. I had a whole career and 2 degrees in human rights before I started as a photographer, and more recently I've spent a lot of time studying ecology and nature conservation as well, as I've done more and more work in that field. And I think that this knowledge means that I can much more often go a little bit deeper into those kind of stories, or at the very least know the kind of questions I need to ask to get more quickly into the things I don't know or I don't understand, to have an idea of where the interesting rabbit holes might be, and also to avoid some of the dangers and pitfalls and stereotypes that are out there all the time. And you can do this too. It doesn't mean you need a degree or a career in something. It just might just mean reading or watching films or listening to podcasts or just talking to people about the people or the place you're interested in photographing. It could mean taking a class, or learning some of a language, or hiring a translator, or just asking really open questions and listening carefully to the answers. I think the more you know, the more interesting will be the images that you can take. And that, to me, is way more exciting than which lens is the sharpest. There's a book that I think about a lot. It's called On Looking, and in it, the author takes the same walk with, I think, 11 different people, a dog and an architect and a child. And each time they help her to notice different things about the place that she's in. And I think about it a lot, because for me, it's a reminder of the things that we don't know, that we still need to learn, that we can discover if we pay attention. So that's the first thing, to be curious. Then the second thing is to spend the time. When he left Vox Media, Ezra Klein, who I think is one of the best interviewers I can think of, he did a podcast on what he learned from all the episodes of the show. And something he said really stuck with me. And it was that the time he spent reading the books and preparing for each interview was so important that he could easily get an assistant to give him a summary of something, but he didn't, because the information itself was somehow less important than the time that he had spent reading and reflecting and engaging mentally with a topic. And that part was something that you couldn't rush or shortcut. And I think about that all the time, how the time spent thinking about and engaging with a topic is sometimes even more important and interesting than whatever the facts end up being when you get there. This past year, I published a big documentary story in the New York Times, and something that I didn't put in the published story is that I'd actually tried to go on the same adventure that I ended up writing about and photographing. I tried to do it a year earlier, except the first time around, I broke my leg and I had to hop for 6 hours down a mountain. And at the time, I swore a lot. And I was really frustrated, and I was frustrated because I thought I'm going to have to wait a whole year and a whole extra year to do something that matters to me. But in hindsight, I'm actually so glad that it happened for several reasons. But one of them is that it gave me a whole extra year to think about the piece in a way that I think made it so much better than it otherwise would have been. So once you're somewhere, once you've started, time's also important to understand maybe a landscape, or to build trust with people, or to find out from them what they think the important stories are that need to be told. And so often I've been in situations where spending time has helped me to understand actually that the story isn't what I thought it was. Instead, it was something far more interesting than I'd imagined before I got there. I was in Thailand earlier this year photographing undocumented migrants, particularly their children, living in urban slums and construction camps. And two things I think really helped that project to go well. And the first was that I could spend time with the people who've been working there to understand the complexity of the issues and the stories. And the second was the time I could spend with the kids there themselves, not even taking photos, just messing around and hanging out and playing in the dust. And because the best photos were not from the start, they were from right at the end, once we had a relationship, once they felt like I was someone that they could trust. And I think that is true whatever it is, whether it's landscape and wildlife as well, how much patience and time are absolutely everything. Waiting for the fog to settle or the sun to rise, or waiting for the bird to flap its wings or the lion to roar. So to sum up, in the end, I think great photography is about paying attention. It's about presence and connection, whether you're photographing people or animals or landscapes or whatever it is. And the more time you spend being curious, the time that you spend seeing and thinking about and trying to understand your subject, the more powerful your images will be at the end. This is also why I spend so much time working on coaching and training the staff of the little organizations I often work with, because ultimately, no matter what gear you have, and often it's just a phone, they are the people who have the time and the deepest understanding of the stories, and are there when they're unfolding. I think this stuff's also absolutely fundamental to consent and to ethics, and that's something I made a whole video about. And also to good interviewing, which I also made a whole video about. Because consent can be so transactional. Here, sign this form, click, done. But when you spend time understanding your subjects and the context and the cultures in which they live, when you approach them with respect and sensitivity and learn their boundaries, you can tell their stories and uphold their dignity. And I think the best photos aren't just technically good, they're thoughtful. They reflect a relationship between the photographer and the subject, one that is built on trust and understanding. And that's something that no camera gear is ever going to give you. So yes, I love camera gear, but I think it's fun to play around with it and with different tools, and gear definitely makes our lives easier in some specific ways. But if you're serious about improving your photography, I can only encourage you to invest in the things that I think matter, which are time and curiosity. For some people, money is no object, but for the rest of us, I think there's a real opportunity cost. The hours that we spend working to earn money to buy equipment or thinking about which camera has the best AI autofocus, these are hours we didn't spend reading or talking or learning or reflecting or looking. So which camera should you buy? I think you should buy the camera that you can afford, and then you should learn how to use it so well that you know the buttons and dials with your eyes closed, that it becomes automatic to you, that you can forget about it, and then you can go out into the world. Curiosity doesn't come with an affiliate link, but it makes for the best photos of all. Thank you so much.